Welcome into today's edition of Just the Truth. Glad to have you join me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studio. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. President Donald Trump's defense team rested their case yesterday without Trump taking the stand to testify in his own trial, with Judge Merchan dismissing the jury until after Memorial Day. Closing arguments are anticipated to kick off sometime next Tuesday, following the holiday. Speaking to the media while leaving court yesterday, Trump said that his defense team has already won the case by any standard in the New York versus Trump trial, as he called on presiding Judge Juan Merchan to dismiss the case. We'll have all the details, the latest, for you today. The speculation on whether Joe Biden will really be the eventual Democrat nominee is running rampant again. Liz Peek published a guest editorial yesterday on FoxNews.com titled "Another Surprising Reason Joe Biden Should Step Down." We'll share that with you as well. California will be the first U.S. state to charge an excise tax on guns and ammunition starting in July. The new tax, an 11% levy on each sale, will come on top of federal excise taxes of 10 or 11% on firearms and California's already 6% sales tax. The question: will California's new tax on gun sales reduce firearm violence? We have some opinions on that as well. And comedian Bill Maher and The View co-host Sunny Hostin clashed yesterday over the Israel-Hamas war and how the far left has changed. We have that has changed for you as well. Let's start with President Donald Trump's defense team resting their case yesterday without Trump taking the stand to testify. Judge Merchan dismissing the jury until after Memorial Day. Fox News' Trey Gowdy breaks down the final day of testimony in New York versus Trump, as jurors were dismissed without hearing from the former president on the witness stand.
Costello, I thought, was a little bit better than he was yesterday. I think what he figured out is the substance of what he has to say is helpful for the defense. But when your demeanor is off-putting, that it impeaches, it undercuts what you have to say. Now, my final analysis, the star prosecution witness, Michael Cohen, is completely biased. I think the prosecution did a pretty good job of showing Costello has a little bit of bias as well. So the jury has to sort out, those are the only 12 opinions that matter. The jury has to sort out if you have competing biased witnesses. It's a draw, and draws go to the defendant. It's the government's job to prove each element beyond a reasonable doubt.
And that is where I believe the state of New York has failed. I'm not seeing that their star witness, Michael Cohen, the self-admitted thief, as being that convincing. Do you? Do you believe that after you've heard all the testimony over these past few weeks, what's it been now, a month? Is there any evidence that you see of Donald Trump doing something wrong? Try to be fair about this. Try to be objective. Of any of the conversation, any of the testimony that we've heard, is there a single piece of evidence that was presented that would show that Donald Trump is guilty of what he's being charged with? In case you missed yesterday, here's what we had. Trump's legal team was slated to call on a former commissioner of the Federal Election Commission to testify, but the expert's testimony was not heard after the presiding judge curbed the scope of what he could discuss before the jury. Now, this Judge Merchan allowed Michael Cohen and the prosecution's witnesses to talk about anything they wanted to talk about. But former FEC Commissioner Bradley Smith posted on X yesterday, Judge Merchan has so restricted my testimony that defense has decided not to call me. Now it's elementary that the judge instructs the jury on the law, so I understand his reluctance. But the Federal Election Campaign Act is very complex. Even Antonin Scalia, a pretty smart guy, even though you may hate him, once said this campaign finance law is so intricate that I can't figure it out. Picture a jury in a product liability case trying to figure out if a complex machine was negligently designed based only on a boilerplate recitation of the general definition of a negligence. He went on to say they'd be lost without knowing technology and industry norms. Smith is an election law expert who Trump has called the Rolls-Royce of experts in his field, but he did not testify after Judge Juan Merchan ruled that Smith could speak before the court on the basic definitions surrounding election law, but not expand beyond that scope. Basically, the judge was saying, you got to dumb it down. If I allow you to testify, you got to dumb it down for this jury. Trump, of course, charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree In the case, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg must prove to the jury that not only did Trump falsify the business records related to these payments, alleged payments to porn actress Stormy Daniels, but that he did so in furtherance of another crime, conspiracy to promote or prevent election. Smith served as an FEC commissioner and chair between 2000 and 2005. The FEC, of course, is the U.S. agency dedicated to enforcing campaign finance laws. Smith's testimony was slated to shed light on prosecutors' allegations that President Trump falsifies business records, which is a misdemeanor that's already passed the statute of limitations in order to cover up an election violation. Smith wrote on social media that while the prosecution's star witness, Michael Cohen, was allowed to go on at length about whether and how his activity violated the Federal Election Campaign Act, he was barred from broadening the scope of his previously anticipated testimony, which effectively, he said, led to the jury getting its instructions on the FECA from Michael Cohen. Smith spoke with the Washington Examiner on Monday and discussed what he would have said in court if he had been allowed to testify, basically saying judges instruct the juries on the law, and they don't want to battle a competing expert saying what the law is. They feel it's their province to make that determination. The problem, of course, is that campaign finance law is so complex. Smith said he anticipated laying out the ways the law has been interpreted in ways that might not be obvious, while noting election laws are very complicated matters. Again, the judge was instructing him to dumb it down, and that's not even possible. Smith continued on X yesterday, saying that Bragg's case hinges on prosecutors proving that Trump tried to influence an election through unlawful means, but the office has to rely on their own evidence, as the DOJ and FEC both denied pursuing the case. So, you need to be reminded of this. Sometimes we forget that both the Department of Justice and the Federal Election Commission did not pursue this same case that Alvin Bragg decided to pursue in New York. Smith wrote, if that's the case, isn't it entirely relevant not just to the jury's fact-finding on that question that neither DOJ nor the FEC chose to prosecute, but Judge Merchan won't allow that in? He will, though, allow in numerous references to Cohen's guilty plea and allow Cohen to testify as to how he thinks he and Trump violated the federal election law, though it appears that Cohen is a dunce about campaign finance laws himself. After yesterday's proceeding had ended, Trump said that his defense team has already won the case by any standard in New York, as he called on presiding Judge Juan Merchan to dismiss the case based on the evidence presented.
Well, thank you very much. Just to begin, the news of inflation it really is rampant. It's moving at a level like people have not seem to be able to cut it down. Biden has no control over what's happening. He started it with energy, and now it's taking on a life of its own. It's very sad. We'll get it fixed. I'd like to be out campaigning right now, but again, I'm going to be in here almost 5 weeks in court. They have no case. There's no crime. Every single legal expert, and I can say this again and again, and every time they come out, maybe at some point they'll come out and say, oh, we found something. But every single legal expert, Andy McCarthy, Jonathan Turley, Mark Levin, every one of them, Greg Jarrett, these are great talents. These are actually very brilliant guys, and they're not necessarily on my side historically over the years. But they're very talented people. They're legal scholars, highly respected. Every single person is saying there's no crime. There's no crime. It's a kangaroo court. There's never been anything like this that I've ever seen. Now, I had 2 other trials that were kangaroo courts also. It's stacked up. And hopefully appellate division will take care of those things because they're egregious. And the problem is that New York is really on trial itself. The whole world is watching. They're seeing what's happening. And you can't use conflicted judges. This is a conflicted judge, highly conflicted judge. And you just can't do that. You just cannot allow that to happen because you ruin the whole system. The whole system comes tumbling down. And New York, look, I love New York. This is where I grew up. I was born here. I grew up here. And I see what's happening with this judicial system. And it's just, they call it all kangaroos. And we just can't have it. And I think the appellate courts can take care of a lot of things, but this one shouldn't even get to an appellate court. This should be an easy ruling, And it should really be, and I think it would be great for Judge Marchand to rule from the bench and to terminate this witch hunt. And it needs it. It really it needs decisiveness. Every single scholar says there's been no crime, he's done nothing wrong.
What's your prediction? Any chance whatsoever that there is a conviction on this? 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Send your comments to the Firmin Ford text line. You can leave a quick voice message, and your emails are always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Soon going to be 4 years ago that I started my journey with PhD weight loss and nutrition. I lost 30 pounds pretty quickly, I might add. And I've been able to maintain that for almost 4 years now. It'll be 4 years coming up in July. If this is the year that you have decided that you're going to get healthy, that you're going to lose that weight, that visceral fat that's so damaging around your waist, then now's the time to start. Let me encourage you to make that call today. 864-252-4925. Set up your initial consultation with PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. Boy, am I glad that I met Dr. Ashley Lucas 4 years ago, and that she got me on the right path to getting healthy. You're going to be able to do things that you may have thought you'd never be able to do again. Play with the kids, the grandkids, be able to hike and walk, and maybe play a full 18-round hole of golf and be able to do it and not get so winded. Because when you take that excess weight off, you're just going to feel better. You're going to be able to focus. You're going to be able to sleep better. Your overall health is just going to be improved. 864-252-4925. Call, set up your initial consultation. Find them online at myphdweightloss.com. PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition, the official partner of the Clemson Tigers. Comedian Bill Maher and The View co-host Sunny Hostin clashed yesterday over the Israel-Hamas war and how the far left has changed. So here, let me set the scene for you. Maher said during his appearance that any of the protesters demonstrating in favor of Hamas should just simply go live in Gaza. He said, trust me, you'd go running and screaming and begging to live in Tel Aviv. And he's right. These kids who are out protesting on the college campuses around the country, all they need to do is to go live in Gaza for a part of a day. And they're going to want to live anywhere else but there. And they're going to recognize the reality of what Gaza is all about. This is where Ms. Hostin, when Maher pointed this out and when Maher challenged her and the protesters, this is where Ms. Hostin challenged him, asking, are you at all concerned about the innocent civilians that have been collectively punished and murdered, largely children and women? They always bring this argument up. Are you just tired of hearing this argument when it comes to the Israel war? They never stop to consider what Hamas did when they invaded Israel. Hamas did not have to do that. Had they stayed on their side of the line, Gaza would not be destroyed. Israel would not be trying to remove Hamas from the face of the earth. But they did. They struck first. They killed innocent families. I saw it firsthand just a couple of months ago as Mike Gallagher and I traveled to Israel. We walked through the kibbutz that was first attacked by Hamas. We went to the site where these kids were at the music festival, and some of them were literally slaughtered. I talked with a young lady who was there, who ran and hid for 8 hours in a tree, hoping and praying that she would not be slaughtered. I wonder what Ms. Hostin would say if she could talk to Zoe, who feared for her life for 8 hours, hiding from Hamas terrorists who were walking up and down this area, calling for people to come out. By the way, some of them were wearing Israeli Defense Forces uniforms by then. I'm assuming they had killed Israeli Defense Forces, put their uniforms on, and were walking up and down this area, calling on people, telling them that it was safe to come out, and when they would come out, they would slaughter them. Wonder what Sunny Hostin thinks about those. Bill Maher had a great response, though. Here's the exchange between Bill Maher and Sunny Hostin yesterday.
Are you at all concerned about the innocent civilians that have been collectively punished and murdered, largely children and women? And are you at all concerned about the fact that the International Criminal Court just today issued a subpoena for Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, that's ridiculous, but it's a war.
Why?
It's a war. Because it's a war, and they were attacked, and they're defending themselves. Now, this is a war. Do you think Hamas needs to be destroyed? This is the question.
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
So how can we get out with a ceasefire?
All right. So Hamas needs to be destroyed because they are a terrorist organization who say openly that they want to commit genocide on the Jewish people, on the state of Israel. That's what from the river to the sea means, okay? And they say it very openly. They said, we did this attack. They've attacked Israel 5 times. They've started 5 wars since they were given that land back. They could have chosen to turn that place into any place they wanted to, and they took a lot of money that they took from the international community, and they spent it on bombs and guns and building tunnels. So if they need to be destroyed, how do we do that? It's a war. I don't know how to do that, and you don't know how to do that. I assume the Israeli... Of course, everybody is, but that's what happens in a war. Here's a way to stop that. Stop attacking Israel.
And he's right, isn't he? It's very simple. Hamas, stay on your side of the line, but that cow's left the barn. They can't do that now. They already started their slaughter. Hostin asked again if he was concerned about the innocent lives. They always go to the innocent lives. They don't ever want to point out the fact or acknowledge the fact that Hamas, the terrorists, have killed a lot of innocent lives as well. What about the innocent lives who were taken hostage and held in literally in these underground dungeons? What about those innocents? The audience, along with co-hosts Sarah Haynes and Alyssa Farrah-Griffith, applauded Maher. Co-host Joy Behar chimed in as well and said people needed to stop calling for the destruction of the Jewish people. Hostin also took issue with Maher's use of the term woke and said that she was surprised to hear him say that because she said the term has been weaponized by the political right. Hostin argued that the black community historically used the term woke to note that they needed to be aware of social injustices. Words do migrate. Now we'll use any term you want because maybe that's a word that is triggering, so let's not use the word, Maher said. Want to call it the super far left? Don't tell me that the left hasn't changed, Maher said. I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives who hated the Jews. He added it was a joke when the remark was met with stony silence in the studio, although he noted he'd seen left-wing individuals who had advocated for Hamas. After claiming later in his appearance that he would describe himself as an old-school liberal, Hostin bluntly told Maher, "You've changed, though." Maher's had a few moments over the past 24, 48 hours. He also shot down President Joe Biden's speech lamenting that America is a racist country during his first ever appearance on Fox News. Now, this was in reference to Joe Biden's horrible commencement speech in Morehouse College in Atlanta this past weekend. Biden invoked George Floyd's death during his speech at this historically black college to send the false message that police are killing black men in the streets and that the black communities are left with what he called a trail of broken promises. He further said that Republicans wrongfully don't see black people in the future of America. Maher told Fox News' Greg Gutfeld, "I think it's not helpful. That speech would have made sense some years ago, but acknowledged that not in today's time."
Anything. Let me ask you this: Do you think there is a purpose to him being so stark and bleak?
I think it's not helpful.
Yeah.
First of all, it's anachronistic. Mm-hmm. I mean, that speech would have made sense some years ago. Mm-hmm. I think we should acknowledge that racism still persists, and we should always be making remedial remedies for it. But we're not in the past. I always keep saying, let's live in the year we're living in. We're not living in the year where you have to be 10 times better to succeed if you're a person of color. And in some instances, it's an advantage.
Yeah.
In some places, it's not an advantage. But we're not living in that world that he's talking about. And I don't think that helps anybody.
Maher's right, isn't he? Joe Biden's words in this commencement speech over the weekend did not help anyone. 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Send your comments to the Firmin Ford text line. You can leave a quick voice message, and your emails are always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Whether you're replacing a broken appliance or maybe you're just upgrading, you're totally remodeling the kitchen, when it's time to get those new appliances, when you're ready for them, you don't want to have to wait weeks or even months to get started using them, right? Well, that's not the case when you shop with my friends at Discounted Appliance Warehouse. With over 11,000 square feet and 1,500 appliances at any given time, you can buy today and use today quite often. I'm talking about shopping with my friends at Discounted Appliance Warehouse in Pickens. It's worth the short drive over to Pickens. Jeff, Johnny, Kyle, the whole team over there, they'll take good care of you. They have an award-winning service department, expert installation, extended warranties, and at Discounted Appliance Warehouse, they treat you like family. You're more than just a credit card swipe to all the team over there. Discounted Appliance Warehouse, they're proud to offer Speed Queen, the only washer and dryers with manufacturer's warranties that cover parts and labor. You owe it to yourself if you're looking for a new appliance to head over to Pickens to Discounted Appliance Warehouse online at dawpickens.com, dawpickens.com. So the speculation on whether Joe Biden will really be the eventual Democrat nominee is running rampant again. Liz Peek published a guest editorial yesterday on FoxNews.com titled, "Another Surprising Reason Joe Biden Should Now Step Aside." Joe Biden is running out of excuses, Ms. Peek wrote. While many Democrats have urged him to end his reelection bid, including friendly columnists like the New York Times' Ezra Klein and Washington Post David Ignatius, it's been the conventional wisdom that Biden could not do so, fearful that an even less popular Kamala Harris would replace him as the 2024 Democrat candidate for president. That's changing, she writes. Vice President Harris has been out on the stump performing the kind of all-out energetic campaigning that the president just cannot manage. She meets almost daily with women's groups talking about abortion and black groups talking about racial justice. She travels incessantly to swing states to hand out money and programs, crediting the Biden-Harris White House emphasis on Harris with passing the enormous spending bills at the heart of the administration's campaign. She also frequently entertains important Democrats at her home in Washington, getting to know the important power brokers, she says. Quietly, off the radar, even as she is being virtually ignored by Republican analysts and commentators, Harris's efforts are beginning to pay off. Harris's overall approval ratings of 38%, net 11% disapproving, on average today are slightly better than those of her boss, net 17% disapproving, and they have been improving since the beginning of the year when her net disapproval was above 17%. Biden's have not. Importantly, recent surveys show she is more popular with black voters, where Biden has suffered a serious swoon than the president. Harris can make a solid case that she can carry on the Obama-Biden agenda and that she is healthy and fit to serve 4 more years. If a large portion of Biden's unpopularity is due to his age, Harris would be a significant upgrade, Peek writes. She goes on to say Harris's improved posture comes at a pivotal time in the campaign for the president. Scheduling the first of 2 presidential debates on June 27th, way earlier than usual in the election calendar, has triggered renewed speculation about Democrats dumping Biden at the convention. Some think that the timing of the face-off with Donald Trump many weeks ahead of the August 19th gathering in Chicago is intended to give Democrats some optionality. If the debate is a complete disaster, it's thought, the party will have enough time to regroup and consider an alternative before their convention. Recent polls showing former President Trump leading in critical swing states promised disaster in November, not only for Biden, but possibly for down-ballot candidates as well. Vulnerable Senate candidates in toss-up states like Pennsylvania and Nevada are reportedly distancing themselves from the president, fearful of being dragged down by the top of the ticket. Ms. Peek goes on to write, but what about all those primaries? Is it even possible to ditch Biden? The answer is yes, she says. During the Democrat convention, the party could technically decide to pick another candidate if Biden withdrew from the race or if the majority of delegates was persuaded that the president was not up to the task. And let me pause here for a moment in reading Ms. Peek's editorial piece here. This is what I have been saying all along, is that we're going to get to the summer. Now, I will admit, this surprising challenge for Donald Trump to debate Joe Biden caught me a bit off guard, because I had been speculating that we would go into the summer and we'd get into August for the Democrat convention after Donald Trump has already triumphantly received the GOP nod at the GOP's Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. I was speculating that Biden at that point would probably gracefully step aside. Now, the big hang up here is, what do you do with Kamala? Because she's not going to just walk away. She's not going to just give up. It's not her nature to go away without a fight. So that's the only hang up. However, I've been speculating all along that Joe Biden will not be the eventual name of the Democrat Party's candidate on the November ballot. That he would say, for the sake of the party and for the sake of the country, I'm going to bow out. I'm going to step aside and let whoever, Gavin Newsom possibly, come in and take my place, because I'm just not capable. I admit I'm not capable of serving another 4 years. Now, that'll be hard for him to say, but I do believe that that's probably some of what Joe Biden has been thinking. However, again, this recent challenge for the debate and moving the whole debate schedule up into the early summer, that is a little bit concerning. That's I'm not quite sure what to think of that. Now, Ms. Peake is correct in saying that if it is a disaster for Joe Biden, which I think it will be, I just don't see Joe Biden being able to compete in a debate with Donald Trump. And if that's the case, if he really embarrasses himself, then I think it's going to add pressure to the Democrat Party to make some tough decisions come August at their Democrat National Convention in Chicago. So here's Ms. Peake's theory. Here's how this could play out. She says there's some 4,000 delegates who will elect the party's nominee, and roughly 700 so-called superdelegates who step in only if there's no apparent winner on the first round of voting. There's no legal obligation for any of those delegates to back Biden, she says, in the event of some calamity, a health problem, for example, or a humiliating defeat in the debate. The majority could choose someone to replace the president. Or the party could finally persuade Biden to step aside. Some political analysts have expected him to do so for months, considering his age, infirmity, and declining popularity. Ms. Peake writes, despite considerable pressure, Joe has hung on, perhaps knowing he can best protect his son Hunter from the Oval Office, because his wife Jill has encouraged him to run again, or maybe because of Harris's weak standing. For the first 3 years of his presidency, Biden outshone Harris, who repeatedly got tangled up in the hilarious word salads, but more importantly, was tagged with accomplishing little and especially doing nothing about the open border. And let me remind you, that was one of his first acts becoming president, was appointing Kamala Harris, his vice president, as the southern border czar. She's done nothing. In fact, it was a long time into their administration before she even visited the southern border, and that was only after immense pressure was put on her to do so. Ms. Peake goes on to write, though Harris's approval ratings are still poor, she is arguably more capable than Joe. If Democrat bosses decide to open up the convention to other candidates in order to keep the party from splitting wide open, Vice President Harris is likely to prevail. This is what happened in 1968. And Ms. Peake goes on to remind us of history. Many of you probably too young to remember. I don't fully recall, but I have read about this over and over of what happened in the 60s. You had Lyndon Johnson. He announced he was withdrawing from the presidential race in March of 1968. His approval rating was about 36% according to Gallup, only slightly worse than what Joe Biden's is today. LBJ knew that his chances were dim, given anger about the Vietnam War and he took himself out of contention. At the Democrat convention that year, delegates picked Johnson's vice president, Hubert Humphrey, to succeed him in 1968 as their candidate of choice, despite many within the party seeking an anti-war candidate. Humphrey was not popular either. Only 34% of the country supported him on the eve of the convention, compared to 40% backing Richard Nixon and 17% leaning toward the segregationist former Democrat George Wallace, who ran as an independent that year. Is this kind of starting to add up? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as an independent, potentially? She goes on to write, but nominating Humphrey was the least contentious of possible outcomes. In the end, Democrat power brokers opted for harmony. The decision did not go well. Humphrey lost that year to Richard Nixon in a very tight election, as we know. The reality for Democrats is that if they open up the convention to consider other candidates, Kamala Harris will likely emerge the nominee, because they just can't deny her. They cannot ignore Kamala Harris. Ms. Peake makes some good arguments. Yes, this could happen. But the reality is that a lot of people still don't have a clue of who Kamala Harris is. Jesse Waters sent one of his roving reporters out on the street recently holding a photo of the vice president, asking young black people, who is this photo of? Many didn't have a clue.
Who's this? I don't know. Who is that?
I know she's a black woman.
I don't know who that is.
Who the is that?
How's Kamala doing?
Kamala?
Harris, dude. How proud are you of Kamala Harris?
All she does is laugh. What has she done for my community?
Kamala Harris loves her electric buses.
We don't need that, Kamala. She loves a lot of things. She don't love her people.
And this is the problem that the Democrats have. 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Send your comments to the Firmin Ford text line. You can leave a quick voice message, and your emails are always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Firmin Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Firmin Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Firmin Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Firmin, Matthew Firmin. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Firmin Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Firmin Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Firmin Ford online at firminford.com, firminford.com. Ace writes on the text line, Joey, I'd love to see Judge Juan Merchan's net worth after this ridiculous trial. Maybe even the jurors' bank accounts. There's a lot of money being funneled into this farce. Watch when this thing is over. I bet the judge will retire. He is 100% anti-Trump. It reminds me of a classic Western when the posse hangs the convicted. That courtroom is the tree. Prayers for Donald Trump. He needs a godly intervention. Jennifer says, hey, Joey, it's Jennifer. Regarding your question about Trump's attorney, Michael Cohen, not being charged in the theft of his famous client's money, go after the guy who started this mess, this phony Trump trial, for the purpose of interfering with our 2024 election. Go after the dishonorable Alvin Bragg. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate your comments. Your comments are welcome on our text line as well. Jordan writes, with Iran's president dead, the new interim president and whoever comes after has a chance to do something good for the country. But I doubt that will happen since the supreme leader is still in control and the president doesn't really run the country. But this is still a big blow to the country itself. Chris writes, I think a big reason for the doctor shortage is because the government is so involved in how the doctors treat patients. This is in reference to a story yesterday we talked about, and the fact that we are about to be in a world of hurt when it comes to doctors, as so many in the next 10 years, in the next decade, according to a number of different studies, we're going to see more doctors retiring because they're just so frustrated with the system. Many doctors saying they didn't enter the medical profession to argue with insurance companies. And I get that. If you missed yesterday's show, go back and listen. It's worth the listen because we have a doctor shortage. Healthcare is troubling enough as it is, but you throw in a shortage of doctors, particularly primary care physicians, and it's very concerning of where we could be headed with our healthcare. Susan says, Biden always sounds like a mouthful of marbles. He does, doesn't he? He has trouble just completing sentences. He has trouble even reading his teleprompter. Pete says, hey, Joey, if parents are looking for another alternative to the Scouting America, they can also look at the Children of the American Revolution. The CAR is the oldest patriotic organization in the U.S. and trains members to be good citizens and embrace American history. He goes on, he adds, the emergency rooms are filled with patients who don't have a medical professional. I'm thinking mostly the rise in our population has created a greater need. Well, that's true. Baby boomers are getting to that age there, Pete, to where we need more care. But it's also true for baby boomer doctors. They're to the point that they can comfortably retire, but many do not because they love what they do. They love the profession that they joined. But when it gets frustrating because they're arguing with insurance companies, then they decide just to throw in the towel and retire and live the good life. You can't blame them, can you? Faye writes on the text line, Joey, our ERs here appear to be doctors' offices for the illegals. Taxpayers are footing their bills, and the taxpayer who needs the ER is treated as if they are the illegal. Well, you know, the ERs are quite often used as primary care offices, and that is a problem. Appreciate your comment, Faye. Texter says, sincerely pray our country will be returned to us in November. That is a prayer worth praying for sure. Paul writes, medical czar? No. Yes, we need to rethink what healthcare should mean and what's causing the healthcare shortages. I hated a bureaucracy, but I fear it's time for an elected position responsible to the people and a committee of competent professionals. Paul obviously referring to the story of the potential health czar that this was a hot topic towards the end of the session. And there's a movement now within the legislature and coming from the governor's office to potentially take this back up when the legislature's back in session in June to take up some of the sine die agreements. Maybe we'll have a legislator on to talk with us about how that could potentially come about. Joel has a text of encouragement today. It says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. That's from Joshua 1:7. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate that. I received an email from a listener of an opinion piece written by Topher McDougall, who is a professor of economic development and peace building at the University of San Diego. The article talks about California's soon-to-be new tax that starting in July. And the question is, and this tax is on guns and ammunition, the question is, will this additional 11% levy make California a safer place to live? Topher McDougall writes, the National Rifle Association has characterized the law that allows this new tax, the Gun Violence Prevention and School Safety Act, as an affront to the Constitution. But the reaction from the gun lobby and firearms manufacturers may hint at something else, the effect that the measure, which is aimed at reducing gun violence, may have on sales. One way to think about the law's ramifications is to compare state tax policies on firearms with those on alcohol and tobacco products. It's not for nothing that these all appear in the name of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. The ATF focuses on those products because, while legal, they can cause significant harm to society in the form of drunken driving, for example, or cancer-causing addictions. They also have a common history. All have been associated with criminal organizations seeking to profit from illicit markets. Alcohol and tobacco products are thus usually subject to state excise taxes. By making a given product more expensive, this type of tax leads people to buy less of it, reducing the harm to society while generating tax revenue that the state can theoretically use to offset those harms that still accrue. California, for example, he points out, imposes a $2.87 excise tax on each pack of cigarettes. That tax is higher than the national average, but much lower than New York's $5.35 levy. California also imposed a vaping excise tax of 12.5% in 2021. Of the 4 ATF product families, firearms have enjoyed the absence of any state excise taxes until now. Anti-gun advocates and policy analysts have long called for the firearm industry to be subject to the same types of taxes as alcohol and tobacco, given the harms that firearms cause, according to the state bureaucrats, of course. The national rate of gun homicides in 2021 was 4.5 per 100,000 people, 8 times higher than Canada's rate and 77 times that of Germany. It translates into 13,000 lives lost every year. Additionally, nearly 25,000 Americans die from firearm suicide each year. Moreover, more people suffer non-fatal firearm injuries than die by guns, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. He goes on to write, gun deaths and injuries aren't just tragic, they're expensive. One economist estimated the benefit-cost ratio of the U.S. firearms industry at roughly 0.65 in 2009. That means that for every 65 cents it generates for the economy, the industry produces $1 of cost. I think you get where he's headed with this, that by raising taxes considerably in California, there are going to be fewer guns sold, and therefore they believe that's going to cut down on violence. It's going to be an interesting exercise to watch because we all know it's not going to work. We all know that it's just another money grab by the bureaucrats in California to take more money out of the pockets of people living in California, and it's more reason for those of you who are living in California to get out fast. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studio. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined our mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Just click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, find me on YouTube. Be sure and like, subscribe, follow me on my YouTube channel. Just search for Joey Hudson. Appreciate you spending a few minutes of your day with me. Be sure and forward this edition of Just the Truth to some friends. Just click on the share button, send it to a few of your contacts, because if we're going to build our community and we're going to win in the June primaries, and if we're going to win in November especially, we got to build an army of conservatives. The way we beat Joe Biden is through educating people, and no better way than encouraging them to listen to Just the Truth. Hey, keep those comments coming via the Firmin Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Your emails always welcome as well. Joey@joeyhudson.com. We're back again tomorrow. Hope you will be too. Remember, God's got this. He's still in control.